How is the anger of Jesus good news? For me, this is a bit of a counterintuitive question to ask, or maybe a difficult question to ask, shaped by oil paintings and hymnody. I'm not all that accustomed to thinking about an angry Jesus. Jesus in paintings tends to be calm. He often has this long-suffering look on his face. He's very rarely angry, with maybe the exception of when he's chasing people around with that whip in the temple. And I suspect similarly, we would have a hard time finding a lot of hymns that speak to the anger of Jesus. 2 weeks ago, Sue, I was struck that all of the hymns just perfectly aligned with what Laura was preaching about. There was just this incredibly beautifully unified theme in the day. But today, if we were to say, let's have all of the hymns be about Jesus' anger, I suspect we would actually have a hard time finding those. There's just, in the hymnal, there's just not a section called God's Rage that we can draw upon. And yet, we witness this anger today. I think I'm uncomfortable as well asking this question, how is God's anger good news? Because I grew up in an incredibly conflict-avoidant family. My father in particular, his dad was a raging alcoholic, and I think in reaction to that was trying to avoid conflict. Anger just felt really dangerous to him, and he didn't want it to be part of his life. And I know for myself, my anger, like my tears, feels out of control. And there's few things I dislike more than feeling out of control. My anger and tears feel like a not entirely housebroken dog, and I just don't want to kind of let it out when there are friends around or visitors around. And yet I just keep coming back to this question. How is this anger good news? I have the sense that it has to be in some way. The scene is an extraordinary one today. There's a gathering of believers, maybe a gathering like this one right now, and they're at coffee hour. And a bunch of Jesus' friends come into coffee hour. They've been out digging in the garden or painting the church or maybe helping folks as part of the Sunday meal. Anyway, these are people who are not afraid to get their hands dirty, and their hands are dirty. And they come in and they just go directly to the coffee hour table and start enjoying donuts and the wonderful other snacks that their church has on offer. And some other members of the church do a pretty big double take at this, and they say to Jesus, "This is gross. Why aren't your friends washing their hands?" And that would be probably pretty good advice, right? I mean, germ theory has not been invented at this point, but the broad idea that it's good to wash your hands before sharing in food, that's probably sensible then and now. And that might be good feedback insofar as it goes, but then they add in, why are these people defiling coffee hour? And Jesus, this is suddenly too much for him, and he blows his stack. He gets red in the face, spit comes out of his mouth, and he says, "You hypocrites." This is not a subtle response that he gives. He says, "You hypocrites, it's you who are defiling coffee hour with the things coming out of your mouth." Oh my God, right? This is a red hot conversation. And can there be any good news coming out of it? Or is this just a fractured relationship that these folks can't recover from? I started wondering this week, kind of looking back over my own life and thinking about those instances where, notwithstanding what I'd learned from my dad, notwithstanding my own anxiety about being out of control, when I had been grateful for anger. And I realized there were actually multiple times in my life when I was thankful for someone else's anger and thankful for my own, and something good had come out of it. And so I want to wonder with you about three things, three places where anger might be a gift. I want to wonder about anger as loving challenge, anger as an act of solidarity, and the third one, this is distinct from the second, but I don't know if I quite have the right name for it, anger as connection, as something that can actually connect you with another. So let's spend some time with each. Anger as loving challenge. As a young person, as a student, I was in many ways living those famous words by Paul in his letter to the young church in Rome, where Paul says, I don't understand why I do the things that I do. Like, I want to do this, and instead I do this other incompatible thing. In particular, a lot of the work that I did as a student was not to a particularly good standard. I worked hard, particularly once I got to the theater department at the University of British Columbia. I showed up very faithfully, but there was this sloppiness to my work, a lack of finish to my work, and looking back on it now, something that even reads as flippancy in my work. I'm kind of embarrassed to name that looking back. It almost looks in some of my essays like I'm kind of thumbing my nose at my professors. Why was I doing that? I don't understand my own actions. I'm remembering John Hammond told me during his own teaching days that, am I right in remembering this, that there was a time when your students would stand up and give you the Nazi salute when you walked into, like, holy smokes. Like, why would you do that? What would motivate you to do so? And yet I was doing stuff like this. I didn't give anyone the Nazi salute. Don't quote me on that. There was a moment when I had done something sloppy and careless and flippant, and Ian Pratt, who was one of my profs in the theater department, he was a man built like a brick outhouse. I think the actual expression is more salty than that, but we're in church, so brick outhouse is what it has to be. He was a solid man. I respected him and I was afraid of him, and I'd made this sloppy and kind of flippant mistake, and Ian came to me and said, you blew it. And actually, again, his language was more colorful than that, but we're in church. And he said, you blew it, and you need to fix this. This is not okay. And I was so shocked by his anger. Nobody, certainly in my conflict-avoidant house, ever spoke to one another in a way, in that kind of way. And it shocked me into a new way of being. When I look back on his anger, it was a hinge moment in my life. I don't want to turn this into an after-school special where there was like a hard before and after. I don't want to imply that up until that moment my work was sloppy, and after that it was really conscientious and excellent, because actually I still turned in several half-baked essays after that experience. I've found several of them lately. They're full of logical fallacies and grammar errors. But it was a turning point in my life, and it set me on a trajectory towards greater care in my work, and greater care for what I would submit to another person. I thought of Ian years later when I heard somebody say that the opposite of love isn't hatred, the opposite of love is indifference. And Ian cared about me enough, he cared about teaching enough, dare we say he loved me enough? In the macho world of that stage, we would have never used that language, but I think it might be accurate. He loved me enough to refuse to be indifferent. He insisted on giving me this loving challenge, which I now, all these years later, have come to understand as a gift. And Jesus gives this gift to his fellow churchgoers. They are speaking in a way that is not okay. They are speaking in a way that demeans other members of the body of the faithful, and he gives them the gift of refusing to be indifferent. He gives them the gift of his anger, and we may hope there's change for them as well. So a second possibility, anger as an act of solidarity. When I was in kindergarten or grade 1, I had my first encounter with bullies. I was in the boys' bathroom, and a pair of older boys, and you know when you're 5 or 6, an older boy is so much bigger than you. Today, someone who is older than me is the same size as me, but in those days, an older child was massive. They were giants, and these boys pressed me up against the wall of the tile wall in the bathroom, and they uttered threats and mocked me, and I was undone by it. I don't imagine those two boys would remember this incident 40 years later. I don't know that they would guess that 40 years later, my scars from that have not entirely healed. That was my first exposure to cruelty in the world. Prior to then, I'd been hurt because I'd tripped and fallen and hit my head on a coffee table, but that was an accident. No one was trying to hurt me, and this was my first moment where I experienced meanness. Someone being deliberately violent towards me shook my understanding of who human beings were and could be, how the world was, how it could be. It made me wonder what other terrible things were possible, if this sort of thing was possible. And recently, I've shared with a lot of you that I've been clearing out my folks' house, and because my father was this meticulous Germanic filer, everything went into files. I found this letter that my mother wrote to the principal about this incident, and I was, across the years, unexpectedly moved by her anger on my behalf. She loved me enough to become furious on my behalf and wrote the principal and said, "You have to do better. This is not an okay thing to happen in the school." I hope you have had the experience of someone blowing their stack on your behalf, of loving you enough to say, this is not an okay way of treating you. I am angry for you, and I'm going to stand up for you. That is an incredible act of solidarity. And Jesus does this for his friends. He sees them being spoken of in this cruel way, in this bullying way, and he intervenes. An amazing act of solidarity with his friends. Okay, one more. Anger as an invitation into connection. And this one, for me, might be the most unexpected. I don't know if it might be unexpected for you, too. Years ago, in my stagehand days, so we would load in shows. We were working very long days to get ready for opening night. By the end of the day, everybody was tired and cranky. And I don't know if you've had the experience of receiving feedback that was either unskillful or ill-timed. So at the end of the day, my colleague Jonathan gave me some feedback that was either or both of those things. It was certainly not something that I had the capacity to receive in my exhaustion in that moment. Really unwelcome words. And because I was caught off guard by that feedback, I didn't have sort of the time to do what my family system had taught me to do growing up. I didn't have the time to sort of find this calm and rational place. And I lost my temper with Jonathan. I can count on one hand the number of times in my life I've had a shouting match with another person. This was one of the occasions when I had a shouting match with Jonathan. I think, I don't know if I would be proud of myself if I were to watch the video today of that experience. But here's the amazing thing, or amazing to me anyway, after Jonathan and I had it out and, shouted accusations and whatever, we were kind of okay with each other. We both said these things we needed to say. What's the expression? Got it off of our chests. There's an interesting expression, right? There's this weight sitting on you, kind of like a cat in the middle of the night that you need to get off of you so you can go back to sleep. And having expressed our anger with one another, we had this connection that we didn't previously. We were deeply okay for the rest of the week and for the run of the show. It was a surprising lesson for me, because with this instinct I have to be super calm in the face of anger, sometimes what folks are looking for when they're angry with you is for you to match their energy level. That's actually evidence that you are invested and present and you care about them. A surprise, right? Anger is this invitation into connection. A few of you will have heard that probably yesterday, maybe the day before, I'm not sure, someone hucked a brick through the window of the sacristy. And so I spent part of yesterday afternoon tacking a piece of plywood over the window. You may have seen it when you came in. I guess we don't live in Portland unless you're covering up a window with a piece of plywood that someone's thrown a brick through. And I've been thinking about my longing to connect with the person who threw that brick, and my longing to share my anger with that person in sort of a safe way. I don't want to have a knife fight with them or anything, but to share my anger. And if they have anger in return to share, I know an enormous number of our neighbors are carrying religious trauma. If they have anger in return to share, to hear that, I think one of the things that's so dissatisfying about hucking a brick through the window and then vanishing is there's no opportunity for any sort of, what am I looking for here? Reconciliation or understanding or restitution. Liz was talking this morning about what it would look like if, as in parenting, there was a sort of natural consequences to an action like this, if someone who breaks a window could participate in fixing it. I'm longing for the connection with this person that would come of sharing my anger with them and perhaps having them share their anger in return, as opposed to just having a window to fix and what's the lesson of this brick throwing. I wonder if something similar didn't happen for Jesus and his fellow people in his religious community. We hear about this blow up, him calling them hypocrites, him saying they're defiling via what comes out of their mouths. Maybe they shout back. And we're so used to thinking of the Pharisees as the villains in this story that I wonder if we kind of foreclose the possibility that after this shouting match, some kind of reconciliation or connection happened between them, that the Pharisees were able to understand why Jesus was angry, or perhaps he came to them the next day and said, I'm sorry I lost my temper, I got too angry, I just was so upset with what you said, and they understood each other in a new way. I like to think that this story of all stories, the story of anger, might be one of connection. So three possibilities whereby in spite of everything, Jesus' anger might be good news. What if anger like this could be a tool for holiness? Kind of like washing your hands, actually, right? washing your hands can be a good idea. We know, germ theory has since been invented. We know there's very good reasons to wash your hands, but it stops being a tool and becomes something destructive when it becomes a test for who is holy and good and who isn't. And maybe anger is something similar to that. When used skillfully, it can be an invitation into connection. And maybe one of the reasons that I have shied away from anger is I've had so few opportunities to become skilled at using it. And so thinking about these moments across my life, what would it look like to become more skilled with my anger and perhaps with yours in a way that invites loving challenge, one that invites solidarity, and one that amazingly would invite connection? What if Jesus' anger and yours and mine could actually be an invitation further into God's kingdom?